Flowey Is Not a Good Life Coach by unrestedjade. Chapter 9. Horrible Little Weed. Sans tried to talk him out of his night patrol. Papyrus had been expecting that, and countered that it wasn't fair to make the lesser dog stay up 2 nights in a row. He'd had a full 4 hours of sleep, all at once even. He was fine. It was a practice night. He couldn't miss it if he wanted to. And he had some words for Flowey. The hill had been compromised, and so he'd been instructed to head to a new spot, a clearing deep in the forest near the edge of the ruins of home. Papyrus saw Flowey sitting innocuously in the center of the clearing, and felt a sudden wellspring of terrible emotion at the sight of the not flower but not monster. He was used to fearing Flowey, or even pitying him. Anger was a new one. "Howdy, friend," Flowey said, as Papyrus stepped out of the trees. "You're looking well, considering. Boy, was that ever a 3-ring circus, huh?" He tipped his face to one side. "Papyrus, friend, are you—" "Why don't you just shut up?" Papyrus spat, bearing down on Flowey. "You did that on purpose, so spare me your nonsense." Flowey's smile wilted. "What? Why, Papyrus, I just wanted to watch. You're the one who lost your grip." "Because you frightened me!" Flowey was right, and that was the worst thing. Papyrus had been the one to hurt Undyne through his own lack of control. He was a danger to everyone around him. He never wanted to use his magic again. He wanted to break something. He wanted to sleep for 100 years. Now that the shock had ebbed away, now that he had rested, now that he was standing here in this place with this person, his magic gathered in a bilious lump, a bubble about to break the surface, and it was all Papyrus could do to hold it down. "Now, Papyrus," Flowey said, "it's unattractive to go blaming your failings on someone else. It's natural to feel guilty after what you did, but you need to own your mistakes." Papyrus stomped on the ground hard enough to jar his ankle. "Shut up! Shut up, you horrible little weed!" Oily tendrils of the weight of what he'd done, what he'd very nearly done, God, he was half a murderer, crawled up his spine and ticked against his skull. Unforgivable. Flowey rolled his eyes. "Name-calling now? Very mature." "You listen to me," Papyrus hissed, carried by the momentum of anger and redirected guilt and wild magic. "You stay away from my friends from now on. They've nothing to do with this. Leave them alone, or I swear—" "Or you swear what?" Flowey's face split open slightly, revealing teeth like knitting needles. "Giving me orders, friend? Is that a good idea?" "I don't care!" Papyrus gripped the bone club he didn't remember summoning. "Break my arm again, if that's what you want to do. I got through it once, I can do it again." Flowey could break every bone in his body so long as he didn't hurt anyone else. Papyrus could take it. It would be no worse than what he put Undyne through. Papyrus shook, expecting the blow to fall at any moment, but he stood his ground. Undyne would be proud. This was fantastic. Flowey couldn't keep the elated grin from splitting his face wide open. Here, at the end of a day that had already been supremely entertaining, was his toy practically boiling over with rage. This progress was leaps and bounds beyond his expectations. Papyrus was already armed. He had dared Flowey to harm him. He wished he had some kind of treat to reward such outstanding behavior. He'd been starting to wonder if he'd pushed a little too hard last time, but it looked as though the skeleton was starting to get some steel in his spine. Finally. It didn't take much prodding to get their sparring session underway. Papyrus, for once, was spoiling for a fight, and Flowey was more than happy to oblige. The events that had transpired at the captain's home had sapped much of Papyrus's magic reserves, however, and so it wasn't long until the skeleton was put on the defensive, dodging and running from Flowey's attacks. He kept coming right back, though, snarling frustration and swinging the bone club he'd conjured for whatever petty damage he could inflict. The shift in his demeanor was profoundly satisfying. Papyrus wanted to hurt him, even if only in this moment of anger, even if only in the knowledge that he couldn't really do anything serious. The intent alone represented a paradigm shift, a real breakthrough. "You're slowing down," Flowey pointed out, after less than an hour of playing. "You wasted too much energy on that one-eyed fool." That seemed to throw some fuel on the fire. Flowey could have gleefully kept taunting him until Papyrus dropped from exhaustion. He was so much fun like this. Much better than having to cajole and force him to do what Flowey wanted. He stopped short when he caught the muffled but distinct jingle of Papyrus's cell phone ringing. "Ah," he said, snatching the bone club from Papyrus's hands. You should probably answer that. He squeezed, and the Bone Club dispersed in a cloud of magic. Papyrus glared at him, but even he was smart enough to realize that Flowey had been indulging his little tantrum. He fished his phone from his armor. Yes? He masked the tension in his voice well. So many improvements. Undyne's voice came over the receiver, scratchy and raw. Papyrus, I knew you'd be awake. Hey, so I guess you made a liar out of me earlier, huh? Flowey drifted closer, the better to listen in. Papyrus made no move to prevent this, not that he could have. He seemed to have temporarily forgotten that Flowey was even there. The skeleton's rage bled away, all his attention focused on the voice coming through the receiver. Undyne, are you okay? Papyrus was back to his wet blanket self in an instant. Typical, just when things were going so well, too. I'm so sorry. I know there's no excuse, but... come on, Paps, don't start blubbering about it. I've had worse, Undyne said. Gerson patched me up real good. The only thing I'm pissed about is having to stay in bed for the rest of the week, you big doofus. Papyrus flinched, holding the phone out at an arm's length until Undyne was done yelling. Flowey couldn't help but be impressed that the tiny speaker had withstood the assault. I'm really sorry, Undyne, Papyrus said, meek as a mouse. Oh, don't you worry, Undyne said, at a more reasonable volume. I know just how you're going to make it up to me. Papyrus nodded, getting that people-pleasing glint in his eye sockets. Anything, he said. Flowey scoffed. What an exploitable thing to say. I was hoping you'd say that. Undyne sounded cheerful for someone who'd just had a brush with death mere hours ago. Since I'm going to be laid up for a few days, I need someone to gather the guard reports for the week. Guess who that someone is, Papyrus? Well, now this was interesting. A side quest. Papyrus frowned. Is that really appropriate, Undyne? Not that I'd say no, he added quickly, but I'm the most junior guardsman here. Undyne made a strident noise between a laugh and a bark. Huh! Have you seen Greater Dog's handwriting? It's more ink splatters than letters. Besides, she said, this is going to be your punishment, so don't think you're going to eel out of it just because you're the newbie. Okay, Papyrus simpered. If that's what you want, then of course I'll do it. Good. Listen, Undyne said. I'm pretty beat. I just wanted to check up and make sure you weren't crying too hard or anything, okay? I'll call back in the morning and tell you what you need to do. Papyrus assented, and the two said their good nights and hung up. Well, Flowey said, relishing the way Papyrus jumped. All's well that ends well, right? You even got a job opportunity out of this. Papyrus stepped back, more disgusted than fearful. You don't care about her at all, do you? His posture betrayed that fear was still very much on the table. He held himself like a cornered animal. Flowey smiled. I care about you, friend. He looped his vines around Papyrus's shoulders, keeping him from pulling away farther. Ah, Papyrus, don't be like that, he said, shaking the skeleton gently when Papyrus fought to turn away from him. I'm only looking out for your interests. I said you were going to move up in the ranks. This is your first opportunity to show Undyne that you're more useful than the rest of these idiots. Papyrus didn't speak, glaring at the trees surrounding them. Flowey shrugged. If Papyrus wanted to give him the cold shoulder, that was fine. He didn't need Papyrus to talk, only to listen. You're organized and thorough in your work, he said. By the end of the week, I wouldn't be surprised if that meathead gave you her clerical work to do permanently, which in turn, he said, will make you indispensable to her, along with giving you a greater understanding of the guard's inner workings. You'll need that later when you're captain. I don't want to be captain, Papyrus said, sullen. Yes, you do. Flowey tightened the coils subtly. Look, he said, I know I ask a lot of you, but there's a very good reason why I drive you so hard. One day you'll understand, and you'll thank me. Papyrus's jaw was clenched so tight Flowey could hear his teeth squeaking together. Are we done? Can I go home now? Flowey sighed. Yes, I suppose, he said. He unlooped his vines and let Papyrus go. He watched the skeleton stalk towards the trees. There would be plenty of time to address that attitude and fine-tune it into something more constructive later. For tonight, Flowey would be flexible. Besides, Papyrus was amusing when he was riled up. Oh, Papyrus! Papyrus stopped, back going ramrod stiff. He didn't turn around. What? He snapped. Cheeky. I'll have some information for you during the week about something very important, Flowey said. I thought I'd better give you some warning. He giggled. I'd hate to scare you again, friend. He was underground before he could see the effect his words had had, but Flowey could imagine well enough.